how it feels. So try not to move the thing. Come a little bit closer. Speak.
Assalamualaikum.
Jabir, how does he sound? So speakers.
Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Can you hear me?
Loud, clear, but a little louder, Mahmoud. A little louder.
So a bit louder, she's saying.
Oh, you want me to speak louder?
Yeah.
Okay. Is this better?
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Got it.
So inshallah, what we'll do is we'll have teachers, you will sit there.
Okay.
Teachers will come and start hosting.
Inshallah.
And once you start finishes, he can leave.
Inshallah.
He can go.
Okay.
And just remember this one. Hide it, put it away.
Yeah. Okay.
Abdullah, do you want me to introduce from here or from here?
You can come into this one. Okay. So we don't want to move the microphone at this thing.
We have another one.
No, but this is the only thing. Yes, I can go bring another one real quick.
Right, but then we have time. No time.
I need wire.
Too late.
And again, بس قاعد اسمع البطاريات طبعا بس نسيت. So شغل
Nadim can come here.
very same the time in practice session.
One more minute, and I'll have it live.
هم حيسووا على فيسبوك حيسووا لايف خلاص
Specific instructions to keep you.
Inshallah, no, and I think we put it. You should put me as
You guys are done fine? Done? Okay, she's going to generate the link and then put it on there. Yeah. It'll be on YouTube and then also on the site.
Hello. So, okay, so we're here. So are you ready? Sorry. Yeah, you can start it by the time we do it.
Hi,
So
what
you
is it
said
you
you
really
are in
are?
effect
How you doing? Thank you for being here. I would like to meet Mahmoud and Shahidin.
Assalamu alaikum.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you so much.
Mahmoud, brother. Masoud, he's right. You met him before, right? Yes. Thank you for being here. Thank you. Doing well, thank you. My name is Mara. Wasila. Wasila. Nice to meet you, Wasila. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome to our Sunday conversation. Tonight, I am absolutely thrilled to be able to introduce our speaker. And this young man, who is currently a student at Stanford, Mahmoud Jawad, is going to discuss the Socratic method, an Islamic approach. I have had the absolute pleasure of being able to teach Mahmoud and to work with him as a college guidance counselor. And I've gotten to see him develop over the years as a young man, in his thoughts, and the way that he saw the world. And it's been an absolute pleasure. Our community has seen his strength and has seen students such as him join Oregon Islamic Academy. He came here in Islamic School at MIT, graduated from Oregon Islamic Academy last year. Students such as him have shown this enormous growth in the way that they think, that they look at the world, and that they approach things. And tonight we're going to get to hear him discuss. So without further ado, I want to introduce Mahmoud Jawad. Mahmoud?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you, Teacher Joel, for the warm introduction. I would like to start by thanking the MIT team, the faculty, the teachers, and the leadership for giving me this opportunity and allowing me to speak about how any person can love Islam as much as I do. I'd like to start with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And let's first begin in the Quran and the Sunnah, the tradition of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. The Prophet ﷺ, he was a man who thought. He was not a man who took things as they were. And that is why he goes to Hira and sits there and ponders. And and thinks about the world. He saw the idols in Mecca. It didn't really make any sense to him. Why am I praying to a piece of stone? How is this stone my God? And so he sits in God Hira and he thinks, and he philosophizes, and he thinks, what is there? What more can there be? And the first words that come down upon him are Iqra. Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. Read. Read in the name of the Lord that created. Well, see, through reading, through educating oneself, we can find the answers to most of our questions. And the Quran, in and of itself, is an answer to the questions of the Prophet at first, and the questions of the Sahaba as follows. So why are we taught from a young age by elders to not transcend that obstacle, to not question, to not think about things too deeply? Well, that was ingrained in revolutionary ideas after the rise of colonialism in the Arab world. When the British and the French and the Italians colonized our world, we wanted to revolutionize the system that they gave us after they left us. And the thing that we could associate ourselves with was Islam. But Islam became cultural. It became an understanding not only about the Sunnah and the Quran, but also the practices of our grandfathers and our great-grandfathers, and it lost its essence because it was used as a tool for revolution. And so now we see all these cultural things coming up in Islam. We see how they affect what we want to do and what we're willing to do. And in the Western world here in the United States, I was taught at the Muslim Educational Trust throughout my entire experience that in Islam, you have to separate culture and religion. But why separate the two? Well, culture is something that you can associate yourself with. Islam is something that you believe in. We grasp onto it. And like grasping onto a knife, even though it's hurting you, you can't feel it because you're numb. Well, we're in a due day. We're in the United States. And as I look out to all your beautiful faces, and I bet there's beautiful faces on Zoom as well, I think, how can we implement Islam today? Well, for me, it started with questions. And I can admit that Islam, in my own heart, was weak at a point. That's true for everybody. As we learned from Dr. Omar Suleiman in our Islamic studies class, our iman fluctuates. It goes up and down and up and down. But the most important thing is to not have too low of a floor where you fall below the ideals of Islam, the ethics and morals, because those are the most important things. And so in that fluctuation, more and more and more and more questions were developing in my own mind. And I was trying to find answers and I couldn't. And those questions led to doubt. And that doubt is the most dangerous thing to your iman. Because in doubting one thing, leads you to doubt another thing, and then another thing, and then another thing. Two of my biggest questions about Islam were the rights of women and the religion. And to my youth that are all in this room or on Zoom, this is a question that you're going to hear a lot outside the Islamic community. Why are women oppressed? Why do they have to wear the headscarf? X, Y, and Z. And I thought about it. And I was like, why are women oppressed? And I realized women aren't oppressed. 1400 years ago, in Arabia, a land of arrogance and ignorance, a land of tribal warfare, during the medieval times of Europe, Islam came and gave women the right to vote. Shura, or consultation, as practiced by the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, was what we have today as modern voting. You know, I ask you and you what you think, and we make a decision together. Women had a role in that. They played a significant role in that. Sayyidah Aisha was one of the most renowned scholars on the Hadith. Women are not oppressed in Islam. But I had to question that. I had to ask. And lovely Islamic studies teachers here at the Muslim Educational Trust ingrained in me those beliefs. So in going off to university, I had that with me, but I didn't understand it to its fullest extent until we explored the Torah, the Injil, and the Quran, the books of the Jewish tradition, the Christian tradition, and the Islamic tradition in a secular, non-religious class about literature. And going into the class, I was already uneasy. But the more we read, and the more we explored the three religions, the more it was evident even to these people who have never touched these books, or maybe have touched either the Torah or the Injil, but never the Quran, that religion is a choice. And Islam especially is a religion of choice. You get to pick. You want to go this way or that way, that's all you. But in those questions, you realize which route to pick. And alhamdulillah, I was blessed enough to choose the what I think is correct route. Another question that was really difficult for me to deal with, and is a difficult question generally today in society, is why slavery wasn't completely abolished by the Quran. And you'd think this perfect religion that came down and destroyed the systems of arrogance and ignorance, of bigotry and hatred, why would it keep slavery? Well, it doesn't. So Islam has to be looked at from a historical context as well. It was 1400 years ago in Arabia. It was normal to own a slave. And so it came and opened avenues. It opened doors. If you don't fast, go free a slave. If you commit X, Y, or Z sin, go free a slave. So the slaves are now able to leave this. And then it came and created provisions on what slavery is. It's not just anybody that can be a slave. It needs to be somebody that is acquired through a dispute or a war or a feud. And it's a system that only happens in war, because the tribes in Arabia used to, when they went to war with each other, they would assimilate and turn into one tribe. So that was the system back then. And then in the slavery itself, the human was humanized. It was not a tool or a machine, not somebody that does duties for you. No. It's a human. They have feelings and emotions. They are to be cared for just like you are. They can't work more than you work. They have to dress from what you dress. They have to eat from what you eat. But slowly but surely, a human was rehumanized in the sights of people. They were always human in the sights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then the doors to exit this were open. And so slowly, through the Khilafah of Abu Bakr and the Khilafah of Umar, and after that, we saw slavery decreasing and decreasing and decreasing. And Islam knew that if they came and gave people a shock and said, no more slaves, people weren't going to believe. In the same way that it was applied to alcohol. The revelation first came down and said, don't reach prayer when you're under the influence of alcohol. And then it came down and resolved itself and said, no, just don't drink alcohol at all, for it changes your mind. And so this Islamic framework of growth, an Islamic framework of going from one step to the next, is how we should frame the way we think about the religion itself and the way we should think about our impact. So in the same class, it's called Structured Liberal Education, and so we go into the philosophy books, and then we go into the books of the monotheistic religions. And in reading Plato's Republic, where he gives us a glimpse into the way Socrates thought, one of the greatest philosophers to ever walk Earth, he gave us the analogy of the line. And I'll explain it simply. There's two realms. There's a tangible, things that we can see, we can touch, we can hear, everything that is around us here in this world. And then the intelligible. And intelligible means understanding. So things that are beyond all of this, but we need to use our minds and our minds need to think in order for us to understand. And the line goes as this. So it's divided into sections. The first section is reflections. So say reflection in the mirror, a reflection in the lake, or shadows. So a shadow of a building, all that. So these are more minuscule. Then the thing itself. So a shadow of a chair as compared to the chair itself. And then you cross over into the intelligible or the understandable. And in the understandable, there's also two routes. There's the belief in forms. And that means, okay, I believe in the form of good. I believe in the form of justice. And in these, you have hypotheses. So you have an idea, and then you question the idea, and then you reach that form. But Socrates argues that's where most people stop. Even in science. I know there's probably a lot of scientists both on Zoom and in here, as we are in the Muslim community. In science, you examine something and observe it, and then you reach a hypothesis about it. And when that hypothesis is proved, you can't go any further. Well, to Socrates, there's one step further, and that is the ideal form. And to him, the ideal form is a form of good, being good. Well, in reading this, my iman almost doubled, because to me, the ideal form is Allah. And that is something that Muslims and people of religions try to separate themselves from philosophers and these thinkers because they believe, no, they didn't believe in God. In fact, they did. Socrates in Apology said to the people that were executing him for corrupting the youth, because he was asking them to think, said, I believe in God and you are slandered. Well, let's shift a little back to Mecca. The same thing happened with the Prophet. He was slandered. He was hurt because people did not want to hear the truth. And so in this analogy of the line, you see we get from shadows to tangible items to understanding and hypotheses to the ideal form. And then Socrates argues once we get to the ideal form, it reverses. So the course comes back. So now you've reached a level of, through practice, through the pillars of Islam, through your prayer, through your zakat, through your fasting, through your hajj, through your shahada, you reach this point. And once you've reached this point, what happens? Well, you keep working on it, you keep improving it, and you reach Iman. So now we're at Iman, okay? We've walked all the way through to Iman. And as we first discussed, Iman fluctuates, it goes up and down sometimes. How do we get to Ihsan? Well, Iman is something that's in the heart. Ihsan is something you actually have to think about. Because it's not something that you can completely feel. You never feel like a muhsin. Because if you ever feel like a muhsin, I'm sorry, you're not a muhsin. It's a level that you need to think about. And in the reverse of itself, in your iman, and you're getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you go back. So you go back to the hypotheses and the belief. You go back to your iman, and you think about it. Why do I believe in God? Now those doubts are gone. Because you've reached the ideal form in reverse. Then you go even further back. Let's start with the shahada. Why do I say ashhadu an la ilaha illallah? You bearing witness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, is in of itself you making that choice. I choose Allah. Then we get to prayer. Why does one pray? Well, to a lot of people, prayer is, 5 times a day. We do it because we have to. We do 4 rakats in some, 3 rakats in the other, 2 rakats in the other. But is that really what prayer is about? Well, prayer is calming yourself down. The word salah is literally a call. So imagine you sitting there and having a conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I know if you've had khushu' in prayer, and if you prayed your prayer, and you get up from that prayer, you feel a relief. So now through the iman, we've thought about these things. And now that those doubts are gone, You know, when the shaitan whispers and you're watching a TV show, and he's like, hey, no, it's okay, sir. You'll make up prayer, you'll make up prayer. If it's that steadfast, if you know that it's better for you, if the doubt is no longer there, then it's over. You're not going to miss that prayer. Then you're going to be a Muslim. Let's talk about zakat. Well, zakat, to a lot of people, is 2.5% of the accumulated wealth you have in a year that you haven't used at all. You give to people. It's not that. Zakat in of itself is 2.5% of what you own is not yours. You don't give it. It's not yours. And if you keep it, you're stealing it from others. See, you need to have iman to be able to come back to that. All right, now let's talk about fasting. Why would I put myself through, during the summer, 18 hours of no food or drink? That's too much of a toll on the human body. Why would I do that? Well, I know that I've had friends here and other places that fasted during an entire soccer season or an entire football season. How are they able to do that? Because the iman reversed itself and made it evident to them that this Ramadan or this fasting, whenever it may be, is to cleanse yourself. It's to rid yourself not only of bodily toxins, but also of the toxic ideas that you may have during the year. And alhamdulillah, we're not judged for our thoughts. But now that we've understood that, we get to pilgrimage if you can visit. And that is not mandatory on those who can't afford it. Well, why would I travel all the way across the world and go to Mecca and visit this house? You're visiting the house of Allah. And if you have that iman in you, if you've reached that point and it's reversed itself, now you know. So every single one of the doubts in those 5 pillars has been removed. Therefore, you're a Muslim in each one of those. Now let's come up to the to iman in of itself, and let's talk about the belief in the angels. I can't see them. I can't touch them. Why should I believe in them, right? Like, are they really there? Well, you maybe can't feel them or see them, but their presence is there, and it's sometimes felt. And even in you thinking about it, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists, your mind goes down a tangent, but it always comes back to the truth. And going through all the pillars of iman, you'll still have the same outlook. Here's a very controversial question that a lot of Muslims tell you to shy away from because your brain cannot operate this level. Well, why did the question pop in my head in the first place? What is the origin of God? And I know it's very controversial. That is a question that most have tried to solve. And the answer is we can't solve it. But why can't we solve it? Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists outside of time and space. So the concept of having an origin or having a start is a concept of time, because that's how we operate. We check the time, we go about our day through a schedule, there's a beginning and an end to us. So in order to rationalize where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, we try to rationalize him through the tangible. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not tangible. He's intelligent. He's beyond us. Therefore, he doesn't exist in that sphere of time. And now let's speak about space. Where does Allah? Is he in the heavens somewhere? Where is Allah? Well, we don't know. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created time and space. Therefore, he does not have to exist in either time or space. So he doesn't have to occupy physical mass. And in answering that, there's a steadfast logic that is irrefutable. So how can you now disbelieve in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if you know that even in our framework, he exists? He's beyond. Let's think about it scientifically. So our world our universe is created in perfection, just about. It's not completely perfect. And that is why we have phenomena like black holes, and that is why our universe can crumble at any moment. There's a really, really good YouTube series about this called it's called I'll get back to you guys on that. But it explores science and proves it through the words of the Quran. And so we know that even in the Quran, it's explored how the universe has this eternal fault that can lead it to crumble at any moment. Well, if through science we've proved there's an eternal fault, there's something that completes it, that gets it to 100%. And that something is the essential form of Allah. So until somebody tells you not to question, question. Whenever somebody tells you not to stand up and take space and speak, stand up, take space, speak. Because institutions of power in the United States have turned our Muslim community from a religious identity to a cultural, ethnic, and racial identity. We're not that. We are a religion. And our religion can only be steadfast through us questioning it. For the Quran is a book of answers to the questions. And as the Sahaba, who are the closest to the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, were able to question, why can't we? He was sitting in front of them, getting revelation, and they still had questions. And we're not expecting not to. No, we are expected to question. There's a certain framework in how to question. And Socrates pioneered this. It's called the Socratic method. And it's a method of dialectic, and it's a method of speaking to people. And it's used throughout the legal system in the United States and legal systems all across the world. It's a form of cross-examination. So you ask somebody, let's say, what do you think justice is? Because this is how Republic first frames it. And they go, what is it for its advantages? Like, what is whatever gives people an advantage, you know? And then you ask, what people? And they answer, the people who are, higher up, people in power. And Socrates goes back and goes, oh, so it's what gives people in power advantage. And he continues to ask questions until they have a sealed, airtight argument. And Socrates willingly agrees with him. Goes, yeah, you're right. And then goes, but what about this? And one of the examples was that of a sailor. So is a sailor a captain, or is a sailor a sailor? Which one is it? And if the ship is on course and the captain says, let's take a different course, do we follow that because it's justice, because it's what's advantageous to the captain, or do we follow what everybody else thinks? So you see, in building up that airtight argument, one hair of doubt can break it all down. Same thing with Islam. We build up our iman all the way up. But the moment we have one hair of doubt, it can break it all down. So how do we fix those holes? How do we plug all of those holes in this ship if we're sinking? Well, through finding the answers. And those answers are there. They're in the Quran and the Sunnah, and they're there in our own minds. For tafakkur, or thinking, is a form of worship. And so, if that is the form of worship that somebody chooses to worship in, of course, in addition to the prayers and all the pillars that we talked about, then are they wrong? If it is proven in the Quran that it is a form of worship. You see, a lot of it is political. It's about power structures and people wanting to keep their perception of Islam as the top perception of Islam. But every single one of you has the right to perceive Islam however you want to perceive it. There's no compulsion in faith. It's your religion. You are the Muslim. You are the mu'min. You are the muhsin in some things. And even in that ihsan, no one's ever going to reach perfection. Because we agree even the universe is not perfect. So what even is ihsan? Well, it's perfecting things one at a time. And the more things you perfect, the more muhsin you are. And so we're trying to work this ladder up, and inshallah, we all die at the highest level of ihsan that we can possibly have. And so a lot of thinkers and scholars disagree with philosophy because it changes the structure. It gives every single person through the egalitarian attitude an opportunity to think. So let's recap a little bit on what the Socratic method is. So first, a argument is presented, you question that argument, then you agree with that argument until you question it again, and you keep going into a cycle until you reach a conclusion. If you cannot poke a hole at that conclusion is probably true. And that's what philosophy is. It's just a search for the truth. And isn't the truth Islam? So our thinkers and scholars like Ghazali, Al-Khwarizmi, Al-Farabi were two scholars that we should listen to. We're two people that push the envelope. But what I urge every single person in this room and on the Zoom call to do is think for yourself. Think, why do I believe? What about Islam stands out to me? If we stay in this stagnant state where Islam is the practice and then we have Iman and then we reach a level of Iman, we stay there and we stay there and we stay there, of course it's going to dip back down. You try to continuously grow. And from my perspective, through studying philosophy and having a foundation in Islam here, continuing to study it at Stanford, I was able to understand how to get between that Iman and Ihsan. And that is to think and to question. So, in that Socratic method, we reach a point where our minds cannot go beyond, right? Because our minds are limited. And our minds are limited for a reason, because thinking is not something that is divine. Thinking is a human thing. And so therefore it needs an end point. And that end point, if you really think hard enough, will be Islam. So there's a story, and the story is what Castaway and the movie that Tom Hanks is in with the Wilson Ball is about. And so it's about a voyage that a group of Muslim tradesmen and scholars took. And they reached this island. And on this island, there were no inhabitants but one person. So they reached the island and they're like, we got it. Let's tell you the truth. The truth is Islam. God exists. And he looks at them and he goes, I know. So they look at him and they go, you know. Like, we just came all excited and everything, and we're trying to tell you this revelation. How do you know? I just examine the things that come. I look at those tangible objects. I look at the strings and the way these trees are made up. There's no way that these can be created without a creator. And for our engineering and tech folk in here, and on Zoom, let's explore that a little further in what, say, humans create. So there's been a large spike in computer science, and especially in artificial intelligence in the last, say, 10 years. And the question is, will these machines ever be as smart as a human? Will they ever be smarter than us? Will they supersede our mind? Well, in essence, no. Because a creation can never be as powerful as its creator. Our minds can never transcend the level of our mind. In higher order thinking, which is tafakkur, we can reach the limit of our mind, but we can't go above it. The same thing is true about AI. So you feed a computer information. So you tell it, this is a mic. And you show it what a mic looks like, and you show it millions or billions of examples of mics, and now we can identify what a mic is. But does it know how a mic connects to that computer? Does it know how I'm speaking into it? Does it know all these things? Well, no. Why? Because to this computer mind doesn't have chemical processes, rather electrical processes. It cannot transcend what it is. That's the beauty of the human mind, is that we can transcend what we know through thinking, through being able to rationalize, and through using rhetoric, intellect, and logic. And so the Socratic method is where it started, and philosophers have taken this and applied it to different philosophies. And the most notable philosopher to come after Socrates was Aristotle. And Aristotle explored quite a few things, but most notably ethics, politics, and poetics. And in his exploration of his own mind, we find that he defines justice as being fair and equitable in what you take and what you give. So if I and my neighbor have this pot sitting in front of us, well then I'm going to go in and say, I don't want food. Take up other food. That's not justice. And say, I know that my neighbor has, say for example, a lot of people at his house, and I still go in and take a lot of food. That's not equitable. But the same is true on the flip. Say you have a lot of people at your house, and you go in and you take less than what you usually do. You say, I want to give the other guy some more. That's not justice. Justice is subjective. In every situation, it shifts and changes. But in essence, it's being equitable and fair in what you take and what you give. It's giving the advantage to the others when it's their advantage, and giving the advantage to yourself when it's your advantage. And that is true in Islam as well, because we know that we should stand with haqq. We should stand with the truth, even if it's against ourselves. Even if it hurts us, haqq is haqq. And therefore, those Aristotelian ideas, those Socratic methods, influence the way that we think in this life, and the way that we think about the hereafter. I've had quite a few conversations about Islam with people of religions, people of no religions. And every time we have a conversation like that, we always get to a certain point where there's no more arguments. And I was having a conversation with a friend, and we got to the level that we realized that yes, there's perfection that exists beyond this world. But what is that perfection? And so we continuously talked about it, and I explained how the Quran has signs of the tangible. For example, how the Quran explores the idea how iron was rained upon earth after it was created and wasn't found here. Another scientific evidence proving that that was true. That rain did not exist. I'm sorry, not rain. Iron, excuse me. Iron didn't exist on this earth, but rather was rained down. And so she goes, okay, well, all of this is true. Everything the Quran says is true. If I gave you the same book and I told you to believe in an alien, would you believe it? I'm like, no. She's like, why? And I'm like, because no. It's like, what is it? I'm like, it's Iman. It's the feeling you have in your heart that sometimes is not logical. And there's a book by a professor at Columbia. His name is Suleiman. It talks about philosophy and Islam in conversation with each other. And it's called Open to Reason, if you'd like to read it. And he explores the idea of how a human is separated into entities. There's a physical and animal instinct of a human. There's the soul, the operates with love and emotion and everything. And then there's the part that operates where religion operates, the mind. And to a lot of us, Islam is the physical, praying, fasting, doing all of this. And if we are blessed enough, inshallah we all are, we get to the emotional, have a feeling, have a connection. Well, how do we get into the tapping into the real spiritual sense of it, which is the theoretical, which happens in our mind? Well, I've said it a million times, and I'll say it one more time, is to think. Is to think about this. Because if you don't, we're never going to get to that last level. And that stagnation can only affect our iman in a negative way. And so through the explorations of philosophy and the explorations of the deen, if you are able to connect those, then your iman will not only grow, but you in certain things will be a Muslim. And that is what we all strive for. We strive for that day that we all sit amongst each other in Jannah. And inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mercy on all of us, on all of our souls. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all of you, bless all of my teachers, bless all of these thinkers for the thoughts that they have been able to perceive, understand, and reflect upon. And Socrates has a quote that really stuck with me, and I'll leave you with this in exploring whatever it is that you should explore in your deen. Thought is intermediate between belief and understanding. So thought, thinking, is between your belief and your understanding of your belief. So let's talk about some in mathematics. So let's talk about a problem. And so we look at a problem, say we're in a calculus class, it's freshman year, it's really difficult, you don't want to do it. Yes, I'm talking about me. And so you look at this problem and you're like, okay, I don't know what to do. But you believe that this math's right, because these thinkers came up with it. Well, the only way that you're gonna understand it is if you think about it, you gotta really push yourself. Stay up till 3 a.m., finish all your problems, and you keep thinking, and then at some point, it gets to a point where you're like, oh, it all makes sense to me. Well, for me, that happened when I was reading philosophy. Philosophy in and of itself was making math make sense. And that's something that a lot of people don't understand, is that there's this connection between philosophy and mathematics that is so intense. You need philosophy in order to create mathematics, and you need mathematics in order to argue philosophy. There are variables in philosophy. Why X relates to Y and Z. Anyways, we won't get into all that. But say you do understand it now. Let's say you understand why 1 plus 1 is 2. Say in the first grade. Well, now you know how to count those numbers and add them together. What are you at now after you understand that? You've perfected. You've reached that. So even the applications of tangible, even the applications of thinking about math, philosophy takes a role. And in that role, I ask all of you to go home and create a list of action items to whatever doubt, when I say doubt, pops into your head and your heart, explore it. See why you are doubting it and see what answers there are. Don't always trust Chef Google. There are some chefs that explore it better. And so do your research. And there will be opposing sides and opposing points of views, and you will be confused to a certain extent. Alhamdulillah, I have access to doctors and scholars who have explored the religion very well and can teach it to youth. So please reach out to me if you need to, and I will convey the message. But explore it. Go in. Because that doubt is not going to change unless you change it. And the only way to change it is to explore it. The only way out is through. Not around, but through. Because we're talking about your deen here. Not your culture, not your identity, not your race, not your ethnicity. Your deen. The most important thing. So create that list, explore those things, and inshallah, if there's an opportunity for another conversation like this, we'll go over those things. And hopefully we come out the other side stronger. We come out the other side with more iman, and we are muhsinin in things more than we are right now. So thank you all for coming today. And I'd like to open it up to all of you for questions, concerns, arguments, whatever it is. Thank you. So.
Thank you so much, Mahmoud, for your presentation tonight and your discussion. It's amazing to see how far you have come from where we started to where you are now. I have a question for you, Mahmoud. And you might be aware of this. Pew Research did some longitudinal study over the last 3 years, and they surveyed young people, and by young people, they mean people from 16 to 24. And they found that across religions, whether it's Islam or Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism, it doesn't matter. They found that 16 to 24-year-olds today said that religion or faith is not important to them. The highest percentage that they've ever done. They had a study that came out in 2017 and 2014, and I believe 2009. And every year, that percentage of people from 16 to 24 who say that faith and religion is important in their lives has dropped and dropped. And until this last one, it was the lowest it's been. 2 questions for you, as you are someone who is in that age range of 16 to 24. 1, why do you think this is? 2, as leaders in institutions, religious institutions, cultural institutions, what is it that we can do to bring in people in that age range, 16 to 24, or people obviously before they were 16 years old, to guide them to that place where they find faith institutions as something that's actively going to be something that's important in them and be guideposts for them in the way that they lead their lives.
Thank you, Joel. I think in exploring this at Stanford, it's even more difficult for reverts because they have chosen their religion and continue to choose it. But it's difficult to have that community that's there to help them enforce that religion. And that's the main point. I'm going to give you guys a personal statement. Going into university, I was worried. I was worried about losing my religion. I was worried about losing other things as well. But that was the main worry. You know, a Muslim kid in California, amongst all these other people of different religions, different cultures, different thought processes, whatever it may be. It's in building community. It's in having those people that are there to pick you up when you fall down. And to the youth, I say keep questioning and keep asking. And to the elders, I urge you to try to answer those questions. Don't brush them off. Don't put them to the side. Don't dismiss them. The most difficult of questions have answers in Islam. And also, religion has been skewed to be a conservative framework in the way that you think about the world. You know, you have these religious scruples and it's your identity and you use them to fight against this, fight against that. No. Religion in of itself, especially Islam, liberates. It liberates your soul, your heart, your mind. It liberates you from perspectives that are biased. And so I'd say focusing on that in education through Muslim organizations and schools, and then also focusing on that at home with children to help them realize that, yeah, you have a doubt. Well, okay, let's explore it and let's see how we can get through it. So, in answering your question, how to fix it? Education. And education through answering those questions and giving them an avenue to ask those questions, the really tough ones. And I know there's some that are crossing your mind right now. Yes, those ones. The ones that seem that they have to do nothing with stuff. Because everybody has an emotion. Everybody thinks differently. And so those questions too should be answered. And why that is because of it's a lot easier for a ruling class to rule when they are not fighting against a unified force. And so it's been ingrained in society to try to strip certain things away from certain people, for then they are not unified. And I'll speak to this in this perspective of Stanford. What it does well is try to bring you closer to those who are like you. They understand that there's a value in a community that can see you and resonate with you. And the Muslim Educational Trust does that as well, not only for the Muslim community, for our communities that are partnered with us and that share the same ethics and scruples as we do. So combating that division and educating people on the questions that linger within their mind and allowing them to have the avenue to explore. Thank you.
Well, so my question is, what do you have to say to the ignorant folks that see the Socratic method as nothing but having no good other than getting a nice dialectic flow going and annoying in the sense that it has a lot of unnecessary heuristic stuff, and I'm sure you know what heuristic argumentation is, but the rest of the audience, heuristic argumentation is like the reduction of philosophical inquiry to a rhetorical strategy.
Well, I had a huge conversation about that with people, especially people who are really into STEM. They're like, what are you doing? You're using your mind too much. No, just study for med school and get into med school and then you'll be fine. Well, there's no fun in that. But other than that, it's also, the Socratic method is a tool for you to find the truth. And yes, it's a long, arduous, difficult process in finding that truth. And it's going to strain your mind more than you might think. But it's not in order to make you think less of yourself. And it's not so you can win an argument just for the sake of winning an argument, but it's for the opportunity to reach that truth. And I think I'm going to segue that into even Islamic arguments, where people have a certain perspective and then people have a different perspective, and they're going head to head and trying to prove that their perspective is right, not going head to head and trying to find the truth. And then certain ideas within Islam that come from the Quran and Sunnah are used to combat each other. How are we going to be an ummah if we are combating each other using the same book? There's haqq. There is a haqq to everything. Yes, we might see the world differently, but through the Socratic method, we can reach that haqq. Through the egalitarian attitude where anyone can participate, we can reach that haqq. Through the education, we can reach that haqq. And so it's not as framed by many people who dislike philosophy, an archaic framework that only exists in a mind of a philosopher. No, it's a framework that exists in every single one of our minds. We just have to explore it further until we reach a point where we think we have found a certain truth. And that truth is evident. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not lead our mind to something that is not true, especially when we think about it and we practice the fact, which is a form of worship. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes to you running if you go to him. Any other questions? Yes.
It might be a personal question.
Yes.
So you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but oftentimes we'll have like an aha moment that makes them question and have these thoughts be unraveled. Do you feel like you had a specific aha moment, or was it just an accumulation of all these thoughts and meeting with all these people and going for an MIT, going to Stanford, and being put in a different community that made you have this way of thinking, doubts, and coming to this conclusion? Or was it just like a specific moment you had that made you go like, oh wow?
It's a little bit of both. So growing up, I was always taught to focus on the belief. So, you're a 7, 8-year-old. It's okay if you miss a few prayers. It's okay if you're not fasting all Ramadan. But focus on that belief. Just keep that in your heart. 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 And then I was also taught the importance of the brain, of thinking. And my mother always told me that it's what differentiates us from other species. That we have this mind that operates and allows us to explore rhetoric and explore and gives us intellect. And so I guess compounding those two gave me a foundation upon which I was able to build here at the Oregon Islamic Academy, especially through great mentorship by teachers who weren't scared to answer my questions. One, I remember that I'd be in classes and I'd be like, what about this? What about that? What about this? What about that? Teachers really be like, are you trying to make a point? Are you trying to be funny? Like, why are you asking so many questions? I'm genuinely curious, like, what is it? And I think one of the biggest ones that we've had a lot of conversations about throughout my experience here at Oregon Islamic Academy was the one about slavery. And so it took our sheikh sit me down. And he's like, okay, let me answer your question once and for all. And he was able to answer it very well, and I thought about it. And at first you're like, because your brain is still wondering. But it gets to a point where you're like, yeah, that's true. And then it kind of turned into me, and not me questioning, but me taking action, and me wanting to pray, and me wanting to fast, and me wanting to do all these things. And it was especially during quarantine, because as a lot of you know who are still in high school or graduated high school recently, high school, it's like a lot of things going on at once. You have clubs, and you have organizations you have to go to, and you have sports, and you have school, and you have family, and you have friends, and you have all these things going on all at once. Oh, it gets so much worse when you go to college. Just letting all y'all know. But in COVID, it kind of slowed down. And I had more time to reflect, more time to look within. And I realized that my belief was belief because I was raised in the Islamic tradition. My belief was not belief because I believe it. And that kind of what led me to frame this, that every single person that ever looks at Islam has their own reversion process. No matter if you're born Muslim or if you came into it when you were 59 years old, you have your own reversion process. That point where you pick it. And quarantine was that for me. And so in that time, we were learning from the European Institute from Dr. Ahmad Sulaiman. And when it came time to write college applications, I spoke about Yaqeen. You know, it's a really cool word. And I explored it further and I was like, wow, there's like sex to it. You know, there's ain yaqeen or seeing the certainty, ilm al-yaqeen, knowing about it before, haqq al-yaqeen, which is such a visceral feeling of what certainty is that you can't let go of it. And if we allude back to Socrates, it's the same thing with the lion. There is ilm or knowledge that is not, that is like a shadow or a reflection of the ain. Then you finally get to the haqq, which is the ultimate form. And so I was like, yeah, I'm gonna write about that for college. You know? So I wrote about that, alhamdulillah, it went well. And so I was sitting there, and this is the aha moment, reading Republic, looking at the State line, and right when it was brought up in class, I was like, there's something there. And so I was sitting there, our professor was talking about it, and I was like jotting down like a map of a tree and roots and branches and everything, just trying to connect everything. And then finally it took the night before the essay was due for me to sit down and look at this line. And then I looked at it and I looked at it again and I was like, this is literally the framework of the thing. It was like a spark.
Any other questions for Mahmoud? Mahmoud, we have time, I think, for one more. I'd like to ask you, what is it that you're currently studying at Stanford, and what are your future plans, inshallah?
To go back to answer that question, yeah, it was just a shocking thing, and it felt heavy, and it felt like your mind turned from a stream to an ocean, and in that aha moment, I began to shift my perspective on even what I want to do in life. Now let's segue to Shuma's next question. I went into Stanford thinking I want to do political science and economy. Political science and economy. studying the economy, economics, that's the word. And I then, first day of school, decided to jump into pre-med like the good Muslim I am. And I did that for a few weeks, realized chemistry was not for me, and jumped right back into political science and economy. I had a beautiful Muslim community led by Dr. Amina Darwish at Stanford, who's a Muslim chaplain, who helped me explore my deen. And in doing that, she shifted my focus. And now my major is still political science. And instead of economics, it's philosophy, with a specialization in religious studies. And then inshallah, after that, I would like to work in community building as a sabbatical for learning, and then inshallah attend Harvard Law to get a degree in I don't know yet actually. In a certain field of law, either business or American governance, and then inshallah after that a degree at, yeah, I love studying now, which is something I never thought I would say. A degree in comparative studies between Western law and Islamic law at Oxford, inshallah. And to top it all off, at the end of my life, I want to just philosophize for the rest of it. And I wanted to study Islamic philosophy at Azhar, where I could sit back, enjoy life, and think about the world. Inshallah, you all reach a level of ihsan in the pillars of Islam and the pillars of Iman. And inshallah, I do as well. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So thank you, Mahmoud. Assalamu alaikum, everybody, to everybody who attended. Thank you for the guests who have joined in viewers tonight. Thank you again, Mahmoud.
Thank you. So.
Yeah.